The sonata in E minor, opus 90, a work in 2 movements, is sometimes described as transitional. One may ask, if it is transitional, where has it come from and where is it going? One way to get at that is to compare this work with some earlier works. The opening of the sonata in C minor, opus 10, for example. Now, here is the opening of opus 10, number 2. But we don't have to confine ourselves to the earliest works in the form. Here is the beginning of the Waldstein Sonata, a middle period work. This one, although a far larger scaled and more mature work, is, like the earlier ones, an example of the formula style of setting forth the musical ideas, a kind of equation which poses a dramatic proposition or opposition. The ideas, strongly contrasted, seem to stand out in bold relief against the harmony, so that the interest is centered in a single voice, usually the soprano. Now let us look at the opus 90 sonata. We see that there is a trace of the old formula idea in the question and answer style of the phrasing. But the continuity is now of quite a different kind. The repetitions of a single rhythmic motive are continuous, forming a rising line which is only half of the long phrase. The other half brings in another melodic motive, still, however, accompanied by the basic long-short rhythmic motive, to complete a trajectory of 16 bars before coming to rest on a half cadence. This spells to me lyricism at the outset. Now, more and more expensive lyricism follows, the basic long-short rhythmic motive disguised by syncopation and by decoration of the weak beats. These phrases together make a total of 24 bars of purely melodic exposition. This does not seem like a sonata in Beethoven's old classical mold. No real opposition or problem has been stated in spite of the variety. True contrast comes with the mysterious climb up the ladder of the E minor chord after the full cadence. At the top of the ladder, there is a sudden bursting sidestep to the dominant seventh of C. Note that the long, short rhythm of the opening has been preserved. The precipitous scale falling from these chords seems to have brought in an entirely new element. New it is in energy and speed, and what it signifies emotionally, yet the chords and the scale together are the basic rhythmic melodic motive in disguise. Here is that motive now one whole tone lower than at the opening. Here is its disguise, the scale simply acting like a tremendously elongated third beat extending over a whole extra bar, with the G, the goal of the motive, transposed to 3 octaves lower. A terse cadence in the key answers it, standing in for the answer of the opening. This same phrase now repeats itself a third lower instead of a third higher, as in the beginning. Amazing to think that the 8-bar phrase formulation of the opening operates now in disguise with such dramatic effect, moving downward instead of upward, and, one might say, backward in its melodic emphasis. To illustrate this all in a nutshell, here is the opening 8-bar phrase. And here is its transformation. This may be regarded as one of those hidden forces of which I have spoken, which operate in Beethoven's music to give it an extraordinary felt unity, even though we may not always recognize why. The signpost into the dominant region is misleading. B flat is sounded with its confirming scale. We don't realize, or at least we don't think of that B flat as being identical with A sharp, the leading tone of B, which is where Beethoven wants to go. How simple it would be to simply sound the dominant chord, and we would be right there. This doesn't suit a composer whose purposes are always subtly dramatic. Listen to how mysteriously and with what tension he accomplishes the transition to B. This is, again, our climb up the ladder, this time of the diminished 7th chord on A sharp, the incomplete dominant of B. The confirmation of our key in the next few bars is even more dramatic. After an excited rise with short bursts suggested by the cadence chords a few bars back, the drumming dominant 7th chord seems to point to F sharp, only to burst violently onto the minor 5/9 of B, its true goal, and to dissolve into that key. This is now our second subject, according to the textbook. But it is really only another transformation of our ladder idea, now a B minor ladder and upside down, with its steps slightly altered to fall on weak beats in syncopation. Their decoration with appoggiatura at the repeat does not alter their basic morphology, but gives them a different face. The agitated Alberti figure underneath it comes from the first 3 tones of the basic motive, inverted, struggling to rise. They do rise to the dominant note in a sudden 1-bar diminution of 6 bars of effort. The sforzando denies this dominant with a wrenching G chord twice. These two opposing tones become the sighs that exhale themselves into nothingness at the end of the exposition. All of this seems to indicate that Beethoven's earlier aesthetic, which embraced the idea of establishing a strong dramatic conflict with real differences of ideas to be resolved in a working out section, is now beginning to give way in this transitional work to another idea of drama within the sonata form. The dualistic principle so strongly evident in earlier works is being subtly transformed into something approaching a continuity wherein everything seems to grow or arise from a single idea. The drama lies not so much in conflict as in surprising and subtle transformations which vividly reveal the protean capacities of those small kernels of musical ideas which begin the process. Now, let's go back to the opening. We found unity of rhythm there, but there is unity of texture too. All voices sing and have their own life. They even break into counterpoint. And the range of the line, too, bespeaks great lyrical freedom and intensity of feeling. The development is dramatic, yet it treats essentially only one idea, that first 16-bar phrase. The retransition and recapitulation is remarkable. It is a canonic augmentation of the falling notes of the first motive, seeming to lose all energy and life, but suddenly picking itself up with new life as if recognizing home and rushing joyfully to its doorstep. The Rondo as surely deserves the epithet heavenly length as does the Schubert sonata in reference to which it was given. I think this piece must have been known and loved by Schubert. Compare it with the Rondo of Schubert's posthumous sonata in A. Now, here is Beethoven's Rondo. There is surely similarity of mood and feeling here, even of cut, of length, and of shape of phrase. Beethoven's Rondo, however, has a serenity never allowed to be seriously disturbed by the most dramatic of interruptions. And Beethoven's new sense of unity is both linear and vertical. For example, after the heavenly long melody winds itself to a close, we seem to get a strong contrast. But this turns out to be a disguise of the consequent phrase in the Rondo tune. Here is that consequent phrase. And here is its transformation, the gently yielding quality of the original phrase having become somewhat hard and unyielding. But its brusqueness soon gives way to the angelic choir of the B major episode. The tenderly loving melody is self-reflected above and below a murmuring pedal trill. Marvelous rainbow colors emerge when the pedal is doubled in mirror image against the mirror image in the bass of the two upper voices. The parts all seem to intertwine in loving embrace. Such mirror image passages appear more and more frequently in late Beethoven. They are his way of creating vertical unity, and they seem symbolic of his vision of spiritual harmony, wherein all voices can sing with unity of purpose and feeling. In this movement, the departures from the theme never quite achieve their sometimes strenuous efforts to escape the serenity of its melody, always falling back quickly into tranquility. Here is one example of what I mean. Such development as there is in the movement often takes the form of contrapuntal conversation. The peroration of this unusually leisurely rondo with its many episodes is an imitative passage beginning low in the bass and winding ecstatically upward 4 1/2 octaves before descending in gentle spirals to the graceful and gracious close. The motive upon which this beautiful passage is based is that of the consequent phrase in the Rondo tune. Somewhat altered rhythmically and in diminution, with its small intervals, the minor seconds, expanded to major, and its large interval expanded to a sixth from a diminished fifth, its imitation expands further to an octave. The rest of the line subtly incorporates this motive in further rhythmic diminution, its beautiful curves determined by the basic shape of that motive applied with utter freedom. It is truly one of those hidden unities in Beethoven, and its lyrical ecstasy points prophetically to the spirit inhabiting the later works. Listen to this passage from the opening of the Sonata, Opus 101, and compare it to what we have just heard. Here we see the lyrical expansion of motive clearly present at the end of Opus 90, carried yet farther. This sonata may well be transitional in these various ways, yet remains wholly wonderful in itself, needing no reference either forward or backward, except to the discerning eye and ear of the performer, who is striving to know his Beethoven and feel more and more at home with him.